The house on Merrow Lane. I first saw the house on Merrow Lane on a cold, windless morning in late October. The air had that strange clarity that comes right before winter settles in, crisp, metallic, with the faint scent of dying leaves and soil gone sour from too much rain. The realtor's sign out front leaned slightly to one side, as if it had been there too long, forgotten among the hedges that had grown wild and brittle. I wasn't looking for a house, not really. I'd been driving without direction, somewhere between a habit and a need to feel movement again. But something about that place made me stop. It wasn't grand or inviting, just an old colonial, 2 stories tall, its paint dulled to the color of old bones. The windows stared blankly at the road, panes fogged from within. The porch sagged slightly, its railings crooked, and every plank seemed ready to splinter under a careless step. Yet, beneath all that decay, there was a strange stillness, not the quiet of abandonment, but the heavy, suffocating kind that feels aware of you, the kind that waits. When I pulled over, the engine ticking as it cooled, I could swear the air itself grew thicker. No wind moved the trees. Even the crows that had been circling further up the lane veered away, avoiding the roofline as though pushed by an unseen force. I sat there for what must have been several minutes, staring at the front door. It wasn't locked. It wasn't even fully closed. The gap was narrow, barely an inch wide, but enough to show that faint slice of darkness within. Something about it drew me in. The first step onto the porch made the wood complain, a low groan, almost organic. I remember the smell more than anything. Wet timber, something moldy beneath it, and another faint trace of sweetness, like overripe fruit or decaying flowers. It didn't smell like dust or thyme. It smelled freshly rotten, as though something had just started to spoil. I pushed the door open, and the sound that followed didn't match the motion. No sharp creak, but a dragging whisper, like fabric sliding across the floor. Inside, it was dim, though not completely dark. The daylight outside seemed unable to fully enter. It came in fractured pieces, pale and sickly through the curtains that hung stiff with grime. The wallpaper had curled and bubbled, its floral patterns warped into something almost organic. The floor was carpeted in places, though the fibers had long lost their color, a gray that once must have been red. I could hear the faint hum of something electric, maybe from the wiring or the refrigerator still plugged somewhere deep within, though I never found any appliances. What struck me first wasn't what I saw, but what I felt. The air was heavy, dense, as though the walls themselves were pressing inward. There was that sense, irrational but unmistakable, that I had stepped somewhere I shouldn't. A place that didn't want to be disturbed. Every breath seemed to echo. The staircase rose straight ahead, its steps narrow and uneven, climbing into shadow. The banister was smooth from use, but cold, unnaturally cold, like touching stone that's been buried underground. To the left, an archway opened into a living room, its furniture draped in sheets that weren't white but yellowed like parchment. Dust hung thick in the air, yet when I moved, none of it stirred. That detail stayed with me long after. How still it all was, how frozen the air seemed, as if I was walking through the residue of something once alive. There were faint impressions on the covered furniture, shallow dips, as though someone had sat there recently. I remember pausing beside one, feeling that slight unease crawl up the back of my neck. The fabric was indented, but the dust on top was undisturbed. I leaned closer, and beneath the musty cloth, I caught a faint smell, something like old perfume, faintly sweet and metallic, like violets crushed into rust. I didn't want to go upstairs, but I did. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe it was the sound, faint, rhythmic, impossible to place. It wasn't footsteps, exactly. More like breathing. Not a person's, but the house's. The timbers creaked in slow, deliberate patterns, the walls expanding and contracting as if taking shallow breaths. With every step, the boards beneath my shoes responded like ribs shifting under strain. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched long and narrow, warped slightly as though the house had settled unevenly. The doors were all closed except one at the far end, which stood open a crack. The light there was different, softer, warmer. A trick of reflection, maybe, because it looked almost like candlelight flickering from within. The rest of the hall was cold, but that door radiated a gentle glow that felt almost inviting. The wallpaper up here was stripped in places, exposing bare plaster marked with long scratches. Some were faint, others deep enough to expose the lath beneath. They ran in parallel lines, stopping just short of the floor, as though something had clawed outward from inside the wall. I reached the open door. The room beyond was small, maybe a bedroom once. The window was covered with lace curtains that hadn't been touched in decades, filtering what little light entered into a sepia haze. In the center stood a chair, old, wooden, too small for an adult. Beside it, a mirror leaned against the wall. The glass was fractured but not shattered, its cracks forming a delicate web that seemed to pulse faintly when I looked too long. There was a smell there, stronger now, the same sweetness I'd noticed downstairs, but thicker, like something preserved. I stepped closer to the mirror, and for the first time since I'd entered, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was my reflection shifting out of sync, a trick of fractured glass. But as I leaned nearer, I realized the reflection was standing just slightly closer than I was. The angle was wrong. The shoulders didn't line up. The head tilted, but I hadn't moved. The breath left my throat before I could understand it. The reflection blinked. The house exhaled. The air rushed downward, not wind, but weight, pressing against me from all directions. The mirror darkened, the cracks widening like veins. I turned away and stumbled back into the hall, my steps muffled by a sound that wasn't my own. The breathing was louder now, steady, patient, coming from behind the walls themselves. It followed as I moved, each inhale and exhale synchronized with mine, as if the structure was imitating me and learning. I remember trying to leave. I remember running down the stairs, the boards beneath me seeming to stretch, the distance elongating. The door that had once been open now looked further away, its frame crooked like a mouth in the act of swallowing. Every step echoed with something that wasn't just sound, a vibration, low and resonant, like a pulse deep under the floor. When I finally reached the door, the light outside had changed. The sky wasn't gray anymore. It was colorless, as though someone had drained it. The trees outside the porch no longer swayed, but their branches leaned toward the house, their bark slick as if sweating. I crossed the threshold, and the sound stopped. No wind, no insects, no sound of tires on the distant road. Just silence that spread outward like oil on water. I looked back once. The door had closed. The gap where it had stood ajar was gone, the paint unbroken, as though it had never been opened at all. I left Merrow Lane after that, though the road itself seemed unfamiliar when I turned back onto it. The houses I'd passed before weren't there anymore, just overgrown lots, foundations half buried in weeds. When I checked later, the town records listed no house on that address, no Merrow Lane at all. But sometimes, when I drive at night and the fog rolls low across the fields, I catch sight of a light, a faint, flickering glow, far off where no street should be. It's not the moon. It's not a house light. It's something deeper, duller, like a lantern seen through water. And when the engine hums just low enough, I can almost hear it again, the sound of a house breathing, waiting,